Hi everyone, welcome to my home studio. Today I'm going to demonstrate how I throw one of these growlers. I use a variety of tools for shaping, a number of different shaped pottery ribs, some tools that I've made myself, and common household items. Okay. Um, so the story behind these is I worked for friends Carrie and Jamie Allen in Elkton, Oregon. Jamie and I met at Hiroshi Ogawa's for wood firing, and Jamie began slip casting these growlers, not these particular ones, but he, and Carrie had a home pottery business, and they still slip cast today. So I was fortunate enough coming out of graduate school to go straight into working for them until I got my feet back underneath me from graduating, and I started thinking about how I could throw these. And I like the shape, this nice little teardrop shape on the growler, and the handle, which I'll demonstrate in another video. But really the trick is getting the fit correct with this growler hardware. So I've fashioned a little throwing tool that helps me get the correct shape, and there's a little bit of wiggle room that a little bit of wiggle room, a lot of bit of wiggle room in needing to fit these this hardware onto the growlers. So how I got this tool was taking measurements of a finished growler and then adding in the shrinkage percentage of the clay body, and fine-tuning the measurements to get this shape right here. So things will shrink down pretty drastically. You can see the edge of the fired growler to the tool, it shrinks quite a bit. So it's about 12.5% shrinkage on my clay body. And the fit is quite tight on this one in particular. It kind of varies with the hand-thrown objects. It can be precise to a point. There's always a little bit of variation. So if I can get it within a certain window of size, it'll work well. So for that growler, I'm going to start with 5 pounds of clay, because in throwing 6 pounds, 4 pounds, I found that 5 pounds holds just about 64 ounces, which is a typical measure of a large growler. And 5 pounds of clay is also called a gallon. It's a measurement. So when you hear old school potters talking about how many gallons can you throw, I can throw 5 gallons of clay. How many pounds of clay is that? I can throw 5 gallons of clay, that's 25 pounds. Okay. So I'll cone wedge this a couple times. Certain things I try to pay attention to when I throw these is keeping size of my centered clay similar to all the growlers. And how I do that is, one, making sure that all the clay that I throw is 5 pounds. The other form of measurement is measuring the height from the base of the wheel head to the height of my centered mound. So as you can see, I have my 3 fingers, using, I use my 3 fingers as a measurement of height, and that gives me an even centered piece of clay, and that usually gets me the same height, very similar measurement of height with all my work. Alright, so I do the same thing with cups, bowls. I will center the clay and measure the height so that I'm in the same ballpark of size. So I opened, I try to keep less working stress on my joints as possible. So I'm starting, even with 5 pounds, the clay is relatively stiff. I'll use as much surface area as I can for getting the walls thin enough to move into using my fingers. So I'm using my palm to press that clay up, and you can see how that slip gathers across the surface of my hand. So I'm using the whole surface of my palm, and I can remove that slip and use it for throwing. If this was a larger piece, I would use my palm again. Instead, I'll move to my knuckle. Your fingers are very fragile things. So you want to take care of them. This is how I take care of them while throwing. You can see that groove created by my knuckle, right? Supporting from the inside, adding pressure on the outside. And pulling up. And then when I get to the top where things are just a little less stress on my fingers to throw, I can continue this pull. I'm just evening out that clay wall. Right? So I centered, I opened, I used my palm on the first pass of the pull. I used my knuckle on the second pass. What I'm going to do here is a collaring throw. So again, using my knuckle, what I'm going to do here is just press that clay inward to get that groove. So from here I'm going to collar. I have 3 points of pressure on this cylinder. My right hand is 1, and then my left hand has 2 with my thumb where you can't see it, and then my middle finger where you can see it on the front. This is how I collar. I find it works for me. I get equal pressure from everything. Right? So from here, I'll move to stand up. I have my wheel lifted up so that I can stand and work without being too hunched over. If my wheel was a little bit, if it was on the ground, my back would feel it in the end. So making sure I got my surfaces all slicked up with water. Making sure I got my hand adding pressure on the outside, squeezing that clay on the inside, pinching the clay together, and slowly moving up. So between all those steps, that's a pretty good setup right there. Sometimes I'll go in for another pull if I don't get the height that I want, but just feeling out the thickness of that wall between my fingers, that's right where I need to be. And now from here, we will remove all that slip. So just removing the throwing wings, tightening up the surface a little bit, shaping up the cylinder, and just recentering everything. Also gives me a way to feel the width of the cylinder again. Got this weird little mountain of clay in the bottom of the piece, so I just wanted to press that down. This is a handy thing. I just cut off a rectangular piece of sponge from, large grout sponge like this. And this is actually handy for really tall, narrow cups that you can't get that water out, right? So all I have to do is grab the end. So it beats sponge on a stick for 15 bucks or whatever they charge, right? So from here, I'll clean up the base. Just taking out enough of that extra clay that I don't need. I'm kind of starting it on its form line from base to top. I like starting off with this blue mud tool rib. Bottom is flat, right? Or one of the sides is flat, so I can use that as the bottom, and then I can shape by holding right here. Flares out a little bit, which is where I want the clay to go. And after I get to the top of that rib, I'll continue up. Yep. Love these mud tool ribs, hold their edge real well. I got the first one that I ever bought still right here. The coveted red rib with the sun bleached edges, right? So from here, I'll begin shaping from the inside out. My center opening is nice and tall. I'll start from the top and just press from the inside out to give my hand and arm just that little extra space that's needed. And that flat line, that flat edge on that blue mud tools rib I have on the bottom, and I'm just angling out the rib to push that bottom out, and then I'm coming up again. So you take your time with it. I like taking my time with these things. A lot of, throwing is the setup, right? So what's the step that leads into the next step? You want to make sure you're getting that each successive step completed in a uniform way. So this I'll use to shape on the outside, but now that my bottom has started to flare out a little bit, I like switching over to this round rib. Which helps shape the top and the belly of the piece. Alright, I won't really shape the base too much more. Maybe just bring it out a little bit, so it has that nice transition from foot to belly to shoulder to neck. And I won't go all the way up, right? I'm going to bring that neck into collar. So I know where my hand is by looking at the line of shaping from the inside out, right? And you can feel, I can judge just by intuition of where my hand is, and starting from the top and working my way down. So I have a really nice vase shape going on. We'll stop right there. Once I shape from the inside, I'll come back to the outside again and just clean things up. Clean up that bottom edge, press out a little bit from the inside. There's this back and forth of texture showing on throw rings. So when I smooth out one side, that texture of throw rings will be pressed back inside. So as you can see, the outside is nice and smooth. So after every time I press from the inside out, I want to shape from the outside in. And from here, I'll begin to collar. So just kind of wetting down the surface a little bit to help throw things. Again, this is how I collar. You'll find people collar any number of different ways. I like using my rib for collaring. I'm adding more pressure from the outside and moving inward. What's happening is you're moving more clay into a tighter space, right? So I have a wide circle, I want it to fit into a narrow space, so I'm still pulling that clay upward and inward. And once that clay starts getting collared in and moving up and in, it becomes a little bit easier to collar the neck and bring it in to take shape. So I started with this wide round edge first, and then I'll switch back and forth. Each edge really does affect the clay differently. This is a straighter line here. I'm pressing on the outside, slightly pinching that clay together from the inside, just like any typical pull. Working slowly. If I work fast, I'm usually going to have a disaster, right? So you can see what's happening as I collar. The clay is getting a little bit more thin. With it becoming thin and that tension of moving more clay into a smaller space, I start to get this spiral. So it's really important to support from the inside and compress the two sides together, so the outside with the inside, so that you don't form a spiral crack, which can happen. So letting up on pressure where is needed. There's a lot of little micro things going on. A lot of changes. We're adding pressure, releasing pressure, and it's just one of those 10,000 hour things, right? Do it long enough and you can, you know, react as if you were breathing. So I like the shape of what's happening. I want to bump out the shoulder just a little bit, so grab my trusty shaping tool, wood spoon. You can buy a 3-pack in varied sizes at any grocery store aisle for $3, right? If I was making a smaller bottle, you could saw this off, this half right here, and it'll fit into a smaller space, as opposed to the typical throwing stick that's like 10 or 15 bucks, right? $3, you get 3 of them. They work great as a paddle too, so versatile, right? So I'm just using my spoon. I'll press out a little bit. You can see that line starting to take shape. So I know where my neck is going to be. And then I'm just going to press downward so I can get a nice round shape. All right, see that take form? So the transition is a little more gradual here than as if I were to just leave it. And now that I have that completed, should I shape afterwards? I should shape afterwards. As you can see all the little ridges right here. I'm going to take my rib and shape this after I'm finished with my neck and things like that. So in taking a quick size measurement, this is coming along nicely, right? I'm going to slightly compress this just a little bit with my flat edge on my mud tools rib here, and then just slowly work this in, right? And usually when you collar, you have a uneven rim that results from that, so just take that off. No big deal. And then add a drop of water. And let's get this ready for final shaping. Okay, so we're just right about there, right? What I'm going to do with this tool, I'm going to press in slightly and holds from the inside, pull the clay into filling this cavity here, and that's going to be my top, right? How I came about making this little guy is went on to a program called Tinkercad. and I used their drag and drop shapes and adjusted the shapes to meet the measurements that I took, and we exported those into a file. Kirkwood Community College glass faculty Christopher Gray, and we printed this out. Okay? So homemade tool, handmade tool. It's a lot of fun. I've got a couple ideas of how to, continue on with this sort of tool making process, which I think is exciting. So from here, I want to just remove all that clay from my hands. I want to wet my tool down, and I want to wet down the surface inside and out. So I really want that clay to glide over this tool. So once I kind of start, I'm looking at a couple things. My groove is coming into shape nicely right here, and then I'll work up the piece and bring the top edge into that little crevice. It's not a lot of pressure. If I add too much pressure, it's going to twist, it's going to crank down, and it's going to collapse. So, remember when I said ballpark? Ballpark size is what I'm looking for. Because in using this, like, one, I need to print a new tool that's a little bit more precise. Because if I took this rim all the way over to this edge, it'd be just a little too large for the gasket to fit, and the height between my gasket and where that metal hardware is going to sit right here, this is also a little too much of a distance, so I am going to start with my last shape here from the shoulder to the neck. Stop right before I get to that line. So you can see how it cleaned everything up really nicely, made that shoulder transition really nicely into that teardrop shape that I was looking for, and even after shaping that, I might want to shape again. Okay. The blue mud tool rib has a stiffer edge than the yellow, right? The red is the softest, the yellow is the second to least soft, the blue is stiff, and then the green is the most stiff. So what I do with this green one is I'll press into this lip right here just to bring it in a little bit more. I found that it just needs that little extra push. Great. So I got shaped up nicely. Then the last thing I'm going to do is I'll clean up this edge, round it out, press in just a little bit. This thing is really sharp and I don't want to take too much off. As you can see, I nicked it just a little bit, nicked the clay a little bit with that rib right there. So taking my nice smooth yellow rib, I can buff that out a little bit. Not too worried about it. May have a way to clean that up. So adding just a drop of water on the top and then rounding out the rim. Smoothing that out. Piece of plastic, right? And just letting it glide over the rim and pinching slightly removes that little bit of slip and cleans it up really nicely so that the gasket will fit on. So that's how I use a variety of tools to throw my growlers, right? So, professionally made tools, household kitchen tools, things lying around your studio, use it all. This is a fun one that I'll demonstrate how to use when I put on the handle and finish this thing off. So this was made with Kirkwood Community College faculty Greta Sange in her 3D her digital design class. We were to design an object in Tinkercad and we printed them out. So I like this because I wanted to have a tool that I could use on my work, and Greta showed me how to use the digital tablet, which was really excellent for like writing my name. So this is my Chuck stamp, right? Those are my initials, ZW. I use it all the time, and then on the base, it's my last name, Wollert'z, right? So that is my handwritten last name, just digitally done and then rendered in a 3D file and then printed out. So exciting things. I haven't used this as a hammer or a scraper or a rib or anything like that, but it's a fun little sculpture just to kind of sit on the side of my workbench, right? So long-winded first step of the growler stage. Okay, we'll see you guys soon.